In a rural area of Schleswig-Holstein, close to the border with Mecklenburg-West Pomerania, lies the town of Ratzeburg. It's an unusual place, and one of its most obvious quirks is that its historic centre is on an island. The town's history goes back at least to the 11th century, and it quickly gets very complicated. But the first really famous name connected with Ratzeburg is Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony. In 1154 he founded the bishopric of Ratzeburg. He also had the cathedral built, making it one of 4 so-called Lion cathedrals. A copy of the Brunswick Lion, a monument to Henry, stands in front of the cathedral. Although it has been added to and altered over the centuries, Ratzeburg Cathedral remains one of the best examples of brick Romanesque architecture in Germany. If you want to impress people with your knowledge of architecture without having studied it, Romanesque is kept relatively simple. One telltale sign is the simple round arches. At about the time the Ratzeburg Cathedral was being built, French architects were developing a new style that later became known as Gothic. Look for pointed arches and intricate decorative carvings. If what you're looking at is full of drama and movement, especially if it features lots of cherubs, it's probably Baroque or Rococo. Figures in works of art, even those depicting biblical scenes, are usually shown wearing clothes that were fashionable when the artwork was created, so if you recognise the clothing style, you can probably guess the century. A stained glass window honours Henry, Duke of Saxony, who, as it turns out, married Matilda, the oldest daughter of the English King Henry II. Also connected with the cathedral is Grand Duke Frederick William II of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, a cousin of Queen Victoria, seen here with his wife, Princess Augusta, Duchess of Cambridge. His 19th century austerity measures, an attempt to deal with massive state debts, were unpopular and had a profound impact. Later, Otto von Bismarck remarked that if the end of the world came, he would flee to Mecklenburg, as it was 50 years behind everyone else. The fact that the history of Ratzeburg is linked with Saxony and Mecklenburg only begins to hint at the complicated history of the town. If you have a sharp eye and know what you're looking for, you may find an old boundary stone. Ratzeburg belonged to the Duchy of Saxe-Lauenburg, but in one of those insane chapters that characterised the Holy Roman Empire, in 1648 the cathedral and the surrounding area known as the Domhof formed part of the new Principality of Ratzeburg, which in turn became a part of the Grand Duchy of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. Later, Saxe-Lauenburg was replaced by the district of the Duchy of Lauenburg, but the curious division remained in place until Ratzeburg was finally, as it were, reunified in 1937. Things really came to a head in 1689 when the Saxe-Lauenburg line of the House of Ascania died out, and as so often in these times, a war broke out over who should take over. The Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg had the town fortified, but this incensed the Duke of Holstein, who also happened to be the King of Denmark. His response in 1693 was to attack and almost completely destroy the town. Ratzeburg had to be rebuilt, and its new street layout was designed in the modern Baroque style inspired by the example of Mannheim. Its defences were finally removed in 1816, leaving just a few scant remains, and one of Germany's more curious street names, consisting simply of the word for demolition. To this new, daringly modern town of Ratzeburg was added St Peter's Church, but by this time people were starting to tire of the fussy Baroque and Rococo styles. It represents the transition between late Baroque and early neoclassicism, which draws inspiration from ancient Greece and Rome. Instead of emphasising power and authority, it focused on preaching, and so became a model for other Protestant churches to follow. The causeway linking Ratzeburg to the western bank was once guarded by a castle, but it was demolished to make way for those unsuccessful defences against the Danish king. In total, there are 3 causeways to the island, one of which was built as a narrow gauge railway that closed after only 40 years of operation. This water tower, built on a hill overlooking the island in 1935, is no longer in use. Its viewing platform had to be closed in the 1990s and has remained closed since, which is a shame, because it must have an excellent view. Ratzeburg itself, though, is definitely open for business as a small tourist attraction. Its most famous tourist was probably the English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who visited in 1798. He wrote of the area that it had a sort of majestic beauty, a feminine grandeur. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to send me a postcard, here's the address. And don't forget to visit my website and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Also, if you'd like access to special bonus content and help with the costs of running this channel, please consider making a small monthly donation on Patreon.